travel to well-being, and from humiliation, we travel to dignity. These are journeys that all of us travel. I don't think there's anybody in this room who hasn't traveled these journeys. I might be being presumptuous, but I don't think there's anybody in this room who hasn't traveled these journeys. Because all of us want dignity, all of us want to be in control of our lives. All of us want well-being for ourselves, and all of us want togetherness with the groups of people that we are with our families, with our friends, with our society, with our geographical spaces, with our linguistic spaces. We want to be together. A person with illness, living with mental illness does not want anything else. A person living with mental illness just wants these four things, and these are the basic rights that any person living with mental illness also wants. So, why should that person be denied those rights? Why should that person be repetitively told that you cannot be together with people, you will not be treated with dignity, that you cannot have control of your own life, and forget well-being, we do not have resources for you because there are people dying of tuberculosis. Why should there be a comparative analysis between one human being's need and another human being's need? All humans are equal. Our constitution ensures that. International law now says that persons with mental illness are equal. And human rights laws are the instruments that ensure dignity control for people and participation for people, and ensure this non-discrimination stance of the society. I'm going to move over from there. So, back to my question, why do people do this? I think people do this because of two assumptions. One is an assumption of incapacity. The other is an assumption of dangerousness. When a society assumes that a person living with mental illness is incapable, what it does, for example, I was taught while I was learning psychiatry in PGI-MER Chandigarh, one of the best institutions in the country and the world, to learn how to diagnose and treat people. I was told not to tell them about their diagnosis. If I wrote the diagnosis on the discharge summary, or if I wrote the diagnosis on the leaflet that the person was taking back with them, I had to write 295.0. I could not write schizophrenia. Why? A file was thrown in my face. The day I said, no, I think this person can understand what is happening to him. This person needs to know what is happening to him. Let me at least sit down and explain to him what schizophrenia is and what the dilemmas of a person living with schizophrenia are. I was told, kaun se school se padhe the? And so that assumption of incapacity then goes to other areas of life, that you can't represent yourself, you have to be looked after, you have to be protected, and you have to be represented by other people. This assumption leads to other people and the society assuming the responsibility of well-being of persons living with mental illness. This further leads to that when you're looking after somebody else's needs, of course, if Alok was feeling hungry right now, how would I know? I would only assume that he's hungry or he's not hungry. And over a period of time, my hunger will take precedence over his hunger. And I would remember my needs more than I would remember his needs. That's human. So if I was responsible for somebody else's needs, then it is quite likely that I would try and fulfill those in the manner that is more convenient to me rather than to them. And I would stop conversing with them about their needs. That's what an assumption of incapacity does. And the moment I stop conversing with a group of people, by the very fact that they're diagnosed as persons with mental illness,